Welcome to the Library of Awakening, hosted by CyberX, a space where curiosity meets courage and ideas come alive. Here we explore the thoughts that challenge, inspire, and sometimes even unsettle us, because growth often begins with discomfort. So, welcome to the journey. May this space inspire you to ask questions, explore the unknown, and most importantly, to awaken. This is the Library of Awakening. Alrighty, everybody, what is going on? Welcome back to another episode of Library of Awakening. In today's episode, we are going to dive into the ancient wisdom, symbolism, and esoteric section in the Library of Awakening portion of the CyberX Discord. And we're going to dive into this text right here, the fundamentals of esoteric knowledge. Now, there are a few different lessons that I want to cover in regards to this book. So I'm going to start to make a series reading the lessons in this book here. Nonetheless, this book can be found inside the private CyberX Discord. You guys can come and check it out. So the reason why I'm introducing this knowledge to you guys on the Library of Awakening is because most people spend their entire lives reacting to the world without ever understanding the principles that govern it. What you're going to be looking at and learning in this book is not just a course outline. This is a map of how reality works, how consciousness expresses itself, and how man fits into the greater order of creation. These lessons that we're going to cover in the next few video series are going to be lessons that deal with the macrocosm and the microcosm, nature and man, showing that the same laws that govern the universe also govern your mind, your behavior, your outcomes, and your destiny. We're going to cover symbolism, numbers, cycles, words, meditation, justice, service. These aren't just abstract ideas. They are operating systems that have been used for centuries by initiates, philosophers, and disciplined thinkers to gain clarity of self mastery and inner authority. So, without further ado, I want to actually utilize Chat PDF to go over these scripts for you guys because I want to utilize the highlight tool and I want to highlight things that stand out as we go through these lessons. So here's the table of contents via the lessons that we're going to cover. It's going to be a 12 series video playlist, and I'll make sure to update and create a playlist for you guys on the Library of Awakening YouTube so that way you can come back to these lessons in the future. The lesson 1 today, we're going to talk about the introduction and basic esoteric principles. You can see some of the other lessons. Ones that I feel like are going to be very interesting are the secret sciences, universal justice, meditation, prayer, and ritual, maybe even numbers and cycles. But really great lessons here. 12 of them that we're going to cover over the next consecutive couple of videos scattered throughout the next few weeks. So let's jump into lesson 1. So, introduction to lesson 1. When we founded the association, the philosophers of nature, no organization accessible to the public was in existence. And while I am going over these scripts for you guys today, do me a favor, smash that thumbs up button and subscribe if you're not already. But if anything stands out to you all that you maybe want me to touch on in future videos or anything that just clicks or that you find engaging, make sure that you guys comment in the description down below something that might have stood out to you in today's lesson. The philosopher of nature, no organization accessible to the public was in existence, at least in France, that clarified or disocculted esoteric principles such as alchemy and Kabbalah. However, since esoteric and philosophical groups have been in existence for quite a long time, we assume that the individuals who chose to join us had a certain amount of esoteric background and knowledge. However, as time passed, it became obvious that even though a number of LPN members had spent a greater or lesser amount of time in such groups, most did not have the esoteric knowledge we assumed they had when we wrote the lessons. The present class, Fundamentals of Esoteric Knowledge, is an effort to remedy this situation. This class comprises of 12 lessons which deal with the following subjects: basic esoteric principles and general principles of social and human behavior, creation, the macrocosm and nature, creation, the microcosm and man, which I think are going to be very two interesting lessons, passive symbolism, active symbolism, the word, numbers and cycles, meditation, prayer and ritual, powers, the secret sciences, universal justice, the seven commandments of the Fama fraternities, service, and the invisible order as number 12. It was our intention that this class should last for 12 months only, and not for years. Therefore, it may seem very concentrated at times. This difficulty will promptly disappear with the work, which consists in rereading the content of the lessons often and in actually performing the exercises which are suggested. The goal of the class is not to pass on to you a mini encyclopedia of esoteric knowledge, but to provide a basis. Again, I'm going to highlight that right there. To provide a basis, a springboard toward the individual inner path. For this reason, apart from the material on the cultural aspects of esotericism, the class offers a personal method of initiation that strives to detach itself from ancient or modern egregores. This method, which includes meditation exercises, is based on a numeric and geometric symbolism of universal nature, which, as a matter of fact, renders it less prone to the sway of the various egregores. This condition assists the student in acquiring the necessary inner freedom. Whoever takes this class and does not wish to undertake the proposed initiatory work is free to act as he or she pleases. The present lesson develops a knowledge which is neither alchemical nor Kabbalistic, but which is in accordance with knowledge coming from many years of operative work in these disciplines and others. This class won't deal with a specific discipline except in the case of examples. Let's also specify that we cannot avoid presenting elements which already exist in the other classes or in articles or the newsletter, the little philosopher or the stone. It should be noted that the concepts developed in this class are essentially of Western origin and more specifically Mediterranean. While you study the lessons, do not lose sight of the fact that there are two complementary esoteric aspects: the intellectual aspect, which permits us to sow seeds into the unconsciousness; the inner aspect, which is the source of knowledge coming to us. This knowledge can only be transmitted through the path said to be of the heart. There are two tools to be used in the study of esotericism: the brain and the heart. I really like that. The brain sows and the heart harvests. Lesson 1. Out of unity you arise. The return to unity is your destiny. The mind discovers the path of return, while the heart provides the key to each stage along the way. Dear friend, what is esotericism? What do we mean by esoteric? This is the first point we need to examine. Etymologically, this word means inner, or that which is reserved for the adepts, for those inside, as opposed to what is public, what is done outside, and therefore is exoteric. However, this is clearly an insufficient definition to provide you with a satisfactory idea of the esoteric reality. As we do not wish to use a priori definition, we should agree right at the beginning that it is impossible to define this term at this time because the esoteric experience which transforms an a priori definition into personally experienced knowledge cannot be offered at the beginning of the initiatory path. Glimpses of the origin of the being. It is impossible to be a student and later an esoteric adept without accepting in the beginning several axioms. The truth of these axioms is progressively unveiled through inner contacts. The first point: the absolute is the origin of the whole. The second point: the essence of the absolute is the source of man. The third point: the whole manifestation, only has one aim: to make out of zero, which is the seed of man in the absolute, the infinite. Starting with the absolute, the hierarchy of forces and energies in a descending order is as follows: being first, consciousness second, life third, and matter fourth. The being issues from the void and creates consciousness. As soon as consciousness is, it creates life for its own need for evaluation. Life creates matter as a field for the experiments it needs to conduct. These points will be developed later. The interest in esotericism. If you're interested in esotericism, it is because you feel a certain inner yearning, a certain necessity to understand things and to understand yourself. This yearning indicates that you have passed the initiation of the nadir, the moment when evolution leads you to the densest point of matter. This search for knowledge, for a coherent understanding of the world, cannot be satisfied by ancient science or religion. Therefore, we turn to esoteric disciplines in the hope of finding that answer to our inner quest, which is more or less unconscious when it first arises. In effect, you can verify this esotericism leads, step by step, to an experiential certitude, to a coherent and satisfactory knowledge of the world. In the beginning, however, you need a freely given faith and trust as the driving elements of your work. This faith gradually disappears to be replaced in turn by knowledge. Be very cautious while you move in the domain of faith, because while it can be a motivating force in the beginning, it can also lead you to accept inconsistent ideas and the worst, superstitions. That is very powerful. In the esoteric sciences, regardless of your choice of discipline, each must find his own truth by breaking through one's inner barriers. In the profane world, man's psyche is divided into two zones: the conscious and the unconscious. In fact, the latter is not unconscious. In man, the unconscious is the super unconsciousness, the higher self, which is permanently in contact with the universal whole. The necessities of evolution have constructed barriers which in every being separate more or less firmly the different levels of consciousness existing between the higher self and the physical consciousness. The true initiation, the true aim of esotericism, is to first render those barriers transparent and later eliminate them as barriers and reestablish the connection with the super consciousness. The intellect is the first problem the beginner has to face. Some esoteric schools say it is an obstacle for the initiatory path, but they use it anyway. The problem is that the knowledge and the methods which permeate the penetration of the inner domain are transmitted and acquired through the channel of the intellect. This problem becomes a real hindrance when the intellect ceases to be a medium and instead becomes a goal or an idea in itself. It should be clear that, on the one hand, the language of the physical intellect, which sustains the consciousness of this world, is not the language of the superconscious. On the other hand, if we wish to begin a dialogue between these two levels of consciousness, we must rely on symbolism, which is the only thing that can cross the inner barriers at the beginning of the path. The principle of this dialogue is as follows. The intellect transmits, or attempts to transmit, mental images, such as it understands them on its own level, to the inner consciousness. The later digests them and sends them back while also striving to transmit its own truth to the physical intellect of man. Thus, little by little, the effect of inner barriers diminishes and they can become open borders which are crossed without a passport. This implies that the work should be done methodically. Conditions for esoteric work. The choice of time. The best time for esoteric study is in the evening, just before going to bed. When you cannot study, then mentally and silently review the previous studies. These should be the last thoughts of the day before you fall asleep. This is important because the moment of passage from the awakening state to the sleeping state is the moment where the inner barriers partially move away. In a physical sense, conversely, when we wake up, the barriers rise. And in a physical sense, do not think about the problems of the new day and try to remain in a mentally void state for a moment so you can receive the inner message. Note your physical interpretation of the message in a notebook and put the date on it. Note it down as soon as possible. Otherwise, this volatile knowledge evaporates and disappears. From a practical point of view, it is useful to divide this notebook into 7 sections. The first section is dedicated to a period from Friday night to Saturday morning, the next section to the night of Saturday to Sunday, and so on. Each Friday night, meditate on the experiments of the first section of the book. Each Saturday night, on the ones of the second section of the book, etc. You will notice that the knowledge written on the same nights, those of the same sections of the notebook, is complemented each week. Check and see if the experiments on the same night of the week do not follow a lunar cycle. This point will be developed further later. We shall see why the night of Friday to Saturday is the holy night and consequently the first night of the week of the esoteric week. I'll highlight that. We'll come back to that one. The oratory. An oratory is very useful in esoteric work. It can be a small room or a place in a room or a closet, even a suitcase. This room only becomes an oratory at the moment of esoteric inner and outer work. The mental attitude of the student creates the oratory. It is better to be alone to do the work that needs to be done. At the most, your mate can be present. No animal should be allowed in the oratory during the work, no matter what relationship you have with the pet. Animals have not passed the nadir initiation, and therefore, the cosmic pressure in them is the reverse of the one exerted on those who work esoterically. The occult forces of dogs, particularly, and even more that of cats, which were used in Egyptian magic, can only bring trouble to those who do not master them. If the oratory is a room with multiple uses, the pet can be allowed in, but put outside during the hours of the esoteric work. The general principles of human and social behavior. The secret. At one time, there was a very intense watchfulness to make sure that the law of secrecy was enforced, as it was feared that personal initiation would shatter temporal power. There are still a number of erroneous ideas about the law of secrecy. The fact that its reality is so misunderstood is the source of the troubles of modern society. If the esoteric reality had actually been more widely distributed, it could either have given birth to a philosophy, religion, or it would have forced exoteric religions to reconsider their dogmas. In both cases, the compatibility of science, religion, would have been greater, materialism less pronounced, and the current anxiety about life and death considerably diminished. This anxiety is the basis of many current problems. The law of secrecy is used by many pseudo-masters or gurus and others as a means of hiding their ignorance, of giving themselves importance while remaining quiet about their very modest knowledge or allowing people to believe that they are the only ones granted authority to open or close the gate of the temple. This is the negative aspect of secrecy. We state that everything which can help, everything which leads to the gate of the temple, can be and should be revealed to anyone who wishes to advance on the esoteric path. I like that. It is also understood that he or she should work and in turn should share the information with others, the secrets which are unveiled. I feel like that is literally the definition of the CyberX Discord right there, right? We're in an attempt to share this knowledge, to share this information, to awaken individuals, to spread this information amongst the masses who desperately need it, right? We all desperately need inner work, which then leads to the outer work, which then leads to the betterment of the all, right? There is no problem created in revealing alchemical or Kabbalistic or initiatory secrets because they can only be used practically by those who have attained the proper inner state, that is, by whoever is already engaging on the path of wisdom. On the other hand, the inner experience, or that which the initiate finds behind the veil of the temple, should remain a secret. Everyone should find out on his or her own. It is indeed a supra intellectual knowledge which can only be expressed by the word and not by human speech. And an attempt to transmit our own inner revelations to another will burden him with a responsibility that he may not be in a position to assume. Moving the veil of the temple for someone else demonstrates a lack of wisdom, which definitely slows the author down on his own path. In summary, do not hide the process which leads to knowledge, but keep very quiet about the nature of the experiments and experiences which result from the access to this knowledge. A similar rule can be observed in the profane world, where, without playing with the secret, discretion and reserve are often necessary for two very different reasons. First, in blindly entrusting people with our projects and intentions, we take the risk of triggering negative actions from those who would want to destroy us. We should therefore be watchful. Second, the fact of speaking about difficulties in work, finances, health engages the power of the word. The problem then crystallizes, become fixed, more complex, and harder to resolve. Avoid giving them much force through speech or even through writing, which also has the same effect in this domain. The adepts who have advanced on the esoteric path say that the heart of man vibrates on levels and thus is a very significant guide. Love is the expression of the heart, not that of sexuality or sentimentality. Love is generosity and understanding and the help given to others. This does not mean we should attempt to make others happy, following our own conception of their happiness. True generosity consists in respecting the freedom of others. On the subject of appetites, sexuality, food, and drink, the rule which applies here is no access and no asceticism. Asceticism is to be avoided because it dries the body up and therefore makes it inaccessible to true spiritual energies. There can be a time where you may wish to reduce the intake of food, but this is only for a certain period of time, and it is only necessary when you can really understand the mechanisms which justify this behavior. Sexuality is a part of creation and therefore has a value and use beyond that of procreation. Without completely agreeing with the tantric point of view, which speaks of purely sexual initiatory paths, which is not suitable to Westerners, we believe that a regular life as a couple can help in the balancing of the inner energies. The opposite polarities of man and woman can be reciprocally balanced. The original man was androgynous, and the androgynous state is partially reestablished in the following lifestyle of normal physical couples. Let's point out that the homosexual couples, male or female, are not to be considered as being on the path of leading to androgyny. Asceticism can dry the heart and can also be handicapped on the path. However, a solitary life may not have any drawbacks if a sufficient mental generosity can vivify the heart. In all this, each should progressively find what suits him best because there is probably a best solution for each one to find for himself. Mind you, again, ladies and gentlemen, this is just the introduction. This is just the first lesson, the intro to everything that is to follow in the next 12 lessons. If you guys are enjoying this so far, do me a favor, pause, smash that thumbs up button, and subscribe. I do appreciate the love and the support. It does help this platform grow, helps boost the algorithm, and push these videos out to more like-minded individuals on the search for knowledge and the truth like yourselves. Knowledge and freedom. The first great step on the esoteric path is made when you succeed in presenting yourself and knocking at the gate of the temple. But the gate only opens when the one who knocks is a free knower. That was powerful. Man can acquire different portions of knowledge which are not of the same nature, nor of the same value. At the beginning of the study, this knowledge can be classified in two categories. The first is the knowledge resulting from the study of nature. This knowledge is real and does not change if you study it in the right way. Alchemists call it the fixed knowledge. So also is the knowledge acquired through physics, chemistry, alchemy, astronomy, astrology, etc. In this domain, Man cannot have an influence upon the laws he is learning. He can only use these laws if he obeys them. You can only dominate nature by obeying it. Sheesh, that is another very powerful one right there. You can only dominate nature by obeying it. On the other hand, the secondary category of knowledge comes from the human conventions such as civil laws, even though these strive to reflect the general principles of the equilibrium found in nature. This knowledge is transmitted through customs, social life, and even more so through religious dogmas. It is an artificial knowledge created by man and is modified by changes in society or religion. Ponder this. It is important to do so because our superconscious cannot accept elements of knowledge that are contrary to the laws of nature. Human conventions do not concern the superconscious. Therefore, it is almost useless to attempt to transmit them, except for a small point of ethics, the point concerning our attitude toward the society we live in. Only the initiate is a free being. Physical freedom depends upon the society we live in and upon our position in the society. True liberation, however, is obtained through mental cleansing. I like that right there. True liberation is only obtained through mental cleansing. During the course of ordinary life, many people renounce certain behaviors or satisfactions simply because they are obsessed by false values which impregnate their physical consciousness. This impregnation is the result of social customs, religious dogmas, or even civil laws which have no relation to the principles of nature or the inner structures of man. We can thus observe many mental blocks. Each one must cleanse in himself all that which hinders the broadening of his point of view, his tolerance, and his generosity of heart. In no event should you fall in love with your ideas. Compare the new with which you already have and choose what seems best. You should be willing to let go of old ideas. I like that key vocabulary word right there, let go. Very important. We have serious reasons in insisting that each student work on acquiring the greatest possible mental freedom for himself in the physical world. Genuine initiation is a complete liberation. How can your higher self help you liberate yourself if you don't do it for yourself in the realm already accessible to you? A second significant reason for insisting on this point is the subject of the egregores, which, what is an egregore? It is the psychic and astral entity of a group. All members of a group, a family, a club, a political party, a religion, or even a country, are physically included in the egregore of the organization to which they belong. Of course, each of us belong to several egregores at once. Therefore, each individual is involved in a group receiving the influence of the egregore, that is, the astral counterpart of the group in his psyche. This process is unconscious. The resulting drawbacks are first some perturbating psychic influence in the majority of cases, and second, a restriction of inner freedom. It is impossible to free oneself from certain egregores, for example, the egregores of the country we live in. However, we should free ourselves from all egregores which are not essential. I like that. It's like cutting off dead weight right there, right? Family members, friends, groups, religious dogmas, circles of old, outdated friends that aren't doing anything with their lives. Cut them off. Get rid of the egregores which are not essential. An egregore actually grows by drawing support from the members which constitute it, who in turn, through their repeated actions, vivify it, somehow helping to maintain its power. For a beginner, this is where the danger lies. All the more because of the tendency of man to seek protection, the price of which is often a loss of freedom. We should emphasize here that the association of the philosophers of nature does not perform any group ritual in order to reduce the influence of the egregore to a minimum. Be cautious. The eternal wisdom is such that we are born where things are best for our evolution. Contrary to what it sometimes may seem, and therefore mental freedom should not transform us into dropouts or misfits. It should simply open the freedom of the inner path while liberating us from unnecessary obstacles. An element which is also very important for success on the esoteric path is the elimination of the negativity of the mind. Strive to see the positive side of things, to priori grant the positive part. I like that, simplistic and straight to the point. After studying and pondering a question from your point of view, be aware of its negative aspect, but first strive to see its positive side, however weak it may be. Well, examine in Lesson 5 the influence of the word, as we know that man's speech is in relation to, in resonance with the word. We should avoid words or sentences of negative connotation or quality. That is something that in my personal life, I 110% need to work on. Rather than directly affirming the negative aspect of a thing, it is better to positively express the reverse of its negative characteristic. For example, if by the word you wish to influence the weather, do not formulate it as, I wish for the rain, as most people consider the rain consciously and unconsciously a hindrance, but rather ask that the earth may receive the water that it needs to satisfy its hunger and thirst. In the same sphere of mind influence, if you do not at first feel well inclined toward an individual, attempt at contact first to verify if a harmony can be established or not. In the same way, when an idea or a project is presented, do not refuse it immediately. Always grant yourself some time to think it out, to meditate before you give yourself response, and examine both aspects well, the positive and the negative, but always start with the positive. We have already spoken about some aspects of the oratory and shall now complete the discussion of this subject in view of what we need to accomplish during this class. First is the setup. It is best to put a room aside solely for this purpose. This is not essential, however, preferably a small wooden altar, otherwise a small table. Any other support is fine. A mirror in which you can see your head and chest. 2 candle holders, an incense burner, a binder divided into sections, means of regulating the light or the electrical or solar, sound insulation as best as you can, and comfortable temperatures, sufficient ventilations as well. Cleanse yourself with water. Take a shower and meditate on the water cleansing your body. Put clean clothes on. Drink a glass of water. Rules to be applied in the oratory. Intellectual work. Study the lessons. Repeat the exercises. Take notes. Always read the proposed exercise completely before doing it. The altar can be used as a support to write upon it if you do not have any other support available. Normal lighting, you can also burn some incense. Esoteric work. Weak or no electrical light, burn both candles. Burn incense. Sit comfortably and take the hieratic position, torso vertical, hands on thighs, thighs parted, feet flat on the ground, slightly parted. Breathing for a minute or two. Perform the square breathing exercise. Lungs empty. Breath in for 5 seconds. Stop for 5 seconds. Breathe out for 5 seconds and stop for another 5 seconds. First, do not go beyond 4 or 5 seconds in each phase. Stop immediately if any pain or discomfort occurs. Strive to be mentally calm, to concentrate on the fact that you are then to listen to the higher self. Perform the work or the exercise you choose, and especially take notes at the end of the oratory session, because it is impossible to do all the exercises in one session. At each session, be positive. Think on your own so you can reach a greater freedom of thought
away from all the egregores. Open your heart and listen to it. Meditate according to the influence of the day in the notebook of the experiments. Attempt to obtain a mental void. When your mind is blank, you do not think anymore. Choose a gesture or a sentence, which means that the works is finished. Take note of the sign you chose and do not change it for a period of time. Find a checkerboard, preferably one of 8 by 8 squares, with black and white squares. Place it horizontally in front of you. Place the burning candles on both sides. Fix your gaze on the checkerboard. This does not necessarily happen on the first session, but the checkerboard progressively takes on a uniform color. The squares tend to disappear. The white squares stand for the active energy, and the black square stands for the passive energy. I really like that. As above, so below. Yin and yang. The uniform color is the result of balance of the two. The exercise, when successfully completed, contributes to the rebalancing of these energies in us. Close the session with a sign you choose. This lesson may seem long and scattered, however, it seems essential to provide right at the beginning all the information which we can help you comprehend the appropriate state of the mind acquired to perform successful esoteric work. That is it for today's lesson. This was lesson 1 of the fundamentals of esoteric knowledge. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Followed up in lesson 2, we will dive into the creation of the macrocosm and nature, and depending on how long that lesson is, we might even throw lesson 3 in there with the creation and the microcosm in one video breakdown. So if you guys enjoyed, do me a favor, smash that thumbs up button and subscribe. Don't forget that all of these esoteric works and books can be found inside the private CyberX Discord. Literally hundreds of ancient wisdom, symbolism, esoteric knowledge books, all right here at your fingertips inside the Discord for you guys to utilize, to read through, to enlighten yourselves on as we head into the new year. With that in mind, many blessings, be cognizant, be aware, don't forget to subscribe to the platform, and I will see you guys in the next video breakdown.
I know some of the perspectives that I share may be as challenging for you as they once were for me. But isn't that the beauty of exploration? Every perspective, no matter how unconventional, has something valuable to contribute to it if it's shared. Knowledge is not absolute. It's a living, breathing phenomena, shaped and reshaped over time. The important thing is not always be right, but to always be curious. Explore freely, share boldly, and learn deeply. And don't rely solely on others to validate your discoveries. Stand firm in integrity, even in the face of criticism. Remember that growth always means embracing the humility to admit when we're wrong. Learning from our errors is not a setback, it's the very essence of our progress. So, welcome to the journey. May this space inspire you to ask questions, explore the unknown, and most importantly, to awaken. This is the Library of Awakening,